I've just played for you Bach's Invention number 11 in G minor. For me, this is one of the most inward and elusive of all the 15 two-part inventions. It starts the beginning of the piece, the exposition, with the subject and the counter-subject anchored together as one unit. And the subject is long, it's 8 beats long, and is heard throughout the entire piece in its entirety as that unit and in smaller subject fragments throughout the piece, meanders around as an inquiry and an inward lament. I think this piece particularly shows Bach's deep empathy for the human condition. Well, he chose the key of G minor. This is a dark key for Bach. And what I always think of when I think of G minor are the 3 minor variations from the Goldberg variations. And I think that character applies very well for this piece. And we'll see why when we look at the counter subject. G minor now, here is the tonality, the triad, the 5-finger pattern, G being the tonic, and D being the dominant. Just to review the 3 forms of minor, because we'll need to know those to play this piece, we have G natural minor, all the white keys but B flat and E flat. Then we have the harmonic minor, where the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7th step, F becomes F sharp, raised 7th step. And the final is the melodic minor, where the 6th and the 7th steps are raised on the way up. And we would have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with the E natural, the F sharp, and the G. And would you believe that that is exactly how this subject starts? On the dominant D, these are the first 4 notes of the subject. The bass begins on the first beat with the tonic G, and the second 16th note now begins a series of 32 non-stop 16th notes. Let's play those right now, because this is your 8-beat subject. And if I count those as the beats, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's your full subject. I break up this subject into 3 parts. The first 2 beats are the ascending scale. 1, 2. Now, the next, the beats 3, 4, 5, and 6 make a sequence. First starting with the descending 5-finger pattern. This happens to be D major. And up a 7th. And then it repeats down a step, another 5-finger pattern, this time on C major. Those are 4 beats in the middle. That's the anchor. And then the last 2 beats I call the spiral motive. We jump from the G up a 5th to the D and spiral and down and down. And right after that note, the bass comes in. with the subject full 8 beats, but it's not identical to what we heard in the soprano. And that is one of the things that makes this piece difficult and elusive. So here we are starting now in measure 3 with the bass entry. Now the first 2 beats are identical, but the next 4 beats have 2 departures. Instead of the soprano, which is D major, the bass lowers the F sharp for D minor. And then the next repetition, which is the sequence material going down a step, instead of C major, which the soprano does, what do you think the bass does? Well, if it followed the same pattern, it would lower the 3rd scale degree, which it does, to C minor. If I put these 2 subjects together to test if they're the same or not, this is what I did when I learned the piece, and it was jolting. I'm going to play this for you so you can hear how uncharacteristic this is to have the subjects at the very beginning not matching like this. Most of the inventions, for instance, the C major, number 1, they repeat exactly. And many of them take turns so we can hear it very clearly. So here we are now. You can play those together. Or, and see, yes, they're identical. But look what happens on this one now. I'm putting the subjects together. Brace yourself. Both up to the C. Now the next 5 finger patterns. And the spiral conclusions are the same. Why did Bach do that? And the answer is because he's harmonizing with the companion counter subject that I said was anchored together. So we need to look at that counter subject now. It starts in the bass. It's not 8 beats long. It's almost 7. It starts like this on the G tonic. Now that has a pattern that repeats the first one and then repetition down a step and the upward 4th on a syncopation. Now, buried within that counter subject are some anchor notes that I'm going to play now for you, and I'll call their names: G, F sharp, F natural, E natural, E flat, and D. There were 6 of them, and they outlined chromatically descending the perfect 4th of D to G. And if we had that by itself, that would be a clue for listeners, particularly, well, really throughout the centuries, of a musical form that Bach is using buried a little bit here. He's used it in many of his sacred works, the Passions and the Cantatas, and in several of the solo keyboard works. It's called a hard passage or a chromatic 4th, and the Latin word is passus duriasculas, which means passing with difficulty, a hard passage. And this always means It is an inward and a heavy journey. So there's a big clue right there as to what is the character of this piece. If it's got embedded in here the passus duasculis, this is going to give you an idea of how to locate yourself and what is Bach communicating. Now if I go the other way from bottom to top, that's what the soprano countersubject does with its entry. It's inverted from what the bass countersubject entry did. And its full line sounds like this. It even had the ascending syncopated fourth, but going the other way. But then it goes on to more material. So those anchor notes, now you can hear how dissonant this is with chromaticism. And that is why Bach had to alter the subject when the bass came in, so it would fit the chromaticism of the countersubject of the soprano. So this is fascinating to me. So if I take that bass entry now in measure 3, and with the soprano above, the soprano has just finished. Now this is accompanimental above the soprano here, right here, with these parallel tints going up. This is not countersubject for soprano yet, although it's subject for the bass. Now comes the soprano countersubject. Play both parts now as written for the first 4 measures. But before I do, I want to play the 4 beats that are anchored together. And this is beat 3 of measure 1 and beat 4. And measure 2, beats 1 and 2. And then with the subject for the bass, these are the anchored parts. So it's a little bit different. He's just mixed this up so much. So see if you can find those when I play this in context. Beautiful. Now you see why this has to be the C minor in the bass subject, because it has to fit with the soprano countersubject above it. The last thing on this subject I want to say is how important this upward 7th leap is. I said this was an inquiry, an inner lament, inward lament and searching. Every time we go up here, it's a little looking up and searching. And then look again. And all the way up to here. So the direction direction of these lines and the big leaps of the sevenths is really important to understand that this is all emotional and has the meaning of really an inquiry. So going on now, let's just back up. I'm going to now take the right hand alone, measure 4. Now here's measure 5, going on with connecting material. See what you recognize here. Measure 5. Measure 6. Did you hear those sevenths reaching? Did you hear the descending 5-finger patterns? Let me play that again. Here's the 5-finger pattern coming down and up a 7th. Another one. And that's straight from the subject. That's what I mean. That's the subject fragment, measures 5 and 6. He's quoting the beginning subject. We hear it, but we're not really quite sure. Is it the subject? What's going under it? This is what the bass is doing in measure 5. Measure 6. Does that sound like it might have modulated to D minor? Let's put the hands together and see if that's what he did. Here's measure 5. These are 2 connecting measures. That's a beautiful 6th plus an octave. Now here's some more parallel 10ths. It's lovely, isn't it? And it is now the new key area of the dominant D minor. And we're going to have now another entry. This time the bass gets the subject. And listen to how this sounds now on the dominant. And these always begin, the subject always begins on the 5th of whatever key we are in. So at the beginning, our home key was G minor, a 5th above is the D, and that is where the first subject entered, on the dominant of G minor. Now we're in D minor. So the dominant of D minor is A. And that's how this subject begins. Up a 7th, up a 7th. Now the spiral motive, now listen to this. Continues. Now it goes the other direction. And isn't that interesting that he started on the D and ended 6 measures later still on the D? So we didn't move anywhere. We're still in D minor, but what a gorgeous passage that was. That's all part of this constant flowing, meandering, searching, just flowing and circling. Above that now, in measure 7, is the counter subject in the soprano. Here's our ascending 4th. But he's going to build on that now. Instead of up a 4th, he's going to go up a 6th to the F, and then one more up to the octave. And if we put those together now, the whole 6 measures, we start. These are the anchored 4 beats. subject material here? Yes, you do. Those are more subject fragments. Here it is in measure 11. And here's the 5-finger pattern. And up the 7th. Now the bass. 5-finger pattern. The other parts here in measure 11, the bass goes like this. And then the soprano goes. Might it go? We'll find out. Now if I put these together, this is measure 11. I have arrived on my 2 Ds. I'm still in D minor. This is the tonic D, 2 octaves apart. And it rests here. This is one of 2 places in the piece where we rest for an 8th note. All of the rest of the time we have non-stop 16th notes. So here we are, D minor. Now that could have modulated to F major, from D minor up to the relative major, F major. But he's not going to last for just a second, because right after that he's going to do this. Do you see what a quicksilver transition that was from a brief F major then to a C minor? But it's seamless. That's the beauty of this piece and the mystery of this piece. How he is weaving in the most subtle and deft way between these keys. We hear it, but we never rest long enough on really any of them. Here we do. This measure 11 for an 8th note. And then let's put the hands together. This is another connecting 2 measures. Soprano entrance of the subject on the subdominant C minor. So that's the midway point of the piece. And I'm now going to show you what I'm looking at. This is my working copy that I have highly marked and labeled for the lesson. You get all these colors and labels on another supply. This is on the 11-inch by 17-inch wide horizontal format. And that allows me to get long, uninterrupted material, 4 measures in a row here. That's not possible with traditional music. And so this shows your opening subject for the soprano with the 2 measures, and then the bass with its 2 measures, the counter subject for the bass, and then the inverted counter subject for the soprano here. That's all your opening material on your first system. Second system was connecting material. This third system was all now on the dominant D minor, and this time you can see that the bass led as opposed to the soprano leading up here. But there are the parts anchored together, counter subject and subject, and then this piece extends this subject material with its spiral motives continuing and these leaps of up a 4th, up a 6th, up an 8th, with more searching each time. This is so emotionally laden in here, and that's why I put it all together as one long 4-measure unit. Now your music for your main file that has the big notes that you'll learn your notes from looks like this. It's on the black and white. You have 2 pages of this. And here's your system 1, opening subject material, both voices, 2 measures of connecting material, and then your next entries on the D minor area and connecting material. 2 pages of that, and your supplies. I'm going over all the supplies in the chart package now. Your 3rd supply is this satellite view, black and white, on the 11-inch by 17-inch portrait version. And just before we leave this, I want to show what the power of this. Subject entries, 2 measures of transition. Subject entries, 2 measures of transition. More subjects, transition, subjects, and you're out. But if you really want to see what's going on here, now this is your color structural analysis. This is actually your main file, your satellite view, and this color structural analysis, the CSA. This is the gold of the chart package. I feel very strongly about that. I love making these, even though they're a tremendous amount of work. But I just am fascinated what Bach does with these inventions, and they're all a little different. And if you are interested in getting your chart package, you can get them as digital downloads from my website, sallychristianmusic.com. You take your files and have them printed at a print shop on this lovely 60-pound cardstock. They will last forever. You'll love working from these. So now we can see the map of the entire piece and how simple the construction is. It's very, very straightforward. I put here on the left column these big black brackets to show the 4 big sections of the piece. And they are labeled the opening home key, the tonic of G minor, subject, counter subject, transitional material, modulating to the dominant D minor. More subject, counter subject material, and extended material leading to here, 2 more subject fragments which modulate to the subdominant C minor. Again, subject, counter subject. Not much here. There's not a second counter subject here. See this incomplete subject for the bass and nothing above it, but some thin accompanimental material. Another 2-measure modulatory passage, which is identical in structure to this one. You see the pattern he's using. These are separating between the subject entries. Separating subject entries. Separating subject entries. Now back on your home key of G minor. And the last 2 measures is coda material. So that is, I think, a beautiful, basic floor plan. You can't get more simple than this. But what's not simple are all of these weaving and meandering melodies and these twists and turns. And most important is the beauty between the 2 parts. And that's what I want to focus on for the rest of the lesson, is what to listen for. How are you going to shape this piece and hear the beauty of it as you're learning the notes? That's so powerful. I heard a long time ago, I might have thought it myself as a child, oh, I'll just learn the notes first and I'll put the expression in later. Well, that's ridiculous, because you're going to have to redo the whole thing. You put the expression, you put as much in at the beginning as possible. You just have to take it in smaller bites, and you have to practice hands alone. So now I'm going to just go back to this last two measure transitional material here, measures 11 and 12, with that D minor. Let's just take that. 4 notes falling. Now the parts join. And they keep coming together. And they end lovely on that third. Up the 7th. So this is a C, F. That's a 5/1 cadence. So let's say you only have 10 minutes to practice. Go right to this measure 11, and I bet 3 days of doing practice like this, you will have this accurately and fully memorized. Let's do this again. Back up, just do the 4th beat. Sing it. This is the 7th. E, D, da, da, da. Sing the left hand. C, C, F. Now put them together. Not too hard, is it? Now let's go on measure 12. Slowly. Now remember, this is a quick change of harmony. Each other here. And there's that upward 7th. Now they join. Did you see how that felt when it dropped down from the A flat to the B natural? And right after comes another rising 7th. This is the subdominant C minor, top of page 2, and these are parallel 6ths. You can take a hand, the right hand part, drop it down an octave, and play. There you go. Oh, there's clearly 6ths here. Until here. That's a 3rd. Feel the power here. And drop. That's a G major 5-finger pattern. Up a 7th. And what comes next? An F minor 5-finger pattern. That's beautiful. If I take that same idea of the next entry for the bass, G major 5-finger pattern, up a 7th, and an F minor 5-finger pattern. And for the only time in the piece, these two subject entrances match. I can play them together like this. Out here, soprano continues, the spiral motive to conclude. And then it goes on to this counterpoint and drops. Let's take that soprano by itself. Do you see, this is, I've never done a lesson quite like this before, of taking so much time in showing how to practice slowly and listen for these gorgeous intervals and these scale passages as we try to learn the piece. So this is measure 13. I want to play just the soprano entry. It's climbing up. That's the C minor scale. It's starting on the dominant. G major 5-finger pattern, up a 7th, F minor coming down. Those are your sequences. Now up a 5th and spiral motive. A little faster. 2 beat lead in, scale passage going up on C minor. C melodic minor. Spiral. All C minor and now look at this. How beautiful is that? We arrive on our tonic C, this entire section on page 2, all the way from here, 3.5 measures here to here, we arrive still in the C minor with just the 2 tonic Cs, so far apart, 3 octaves apart. That's a whole universe out there, this vast distance. Now we're going to put the hands together up to tempo now for our C minor subdominant big section. Left hand alone, measure 13. Now comes this beautiful ascending, which is the inverted counter subject, and our anchor notes climbing up. There's that difficult, hard passage. And I like to breath. If you take a slower tempo, you can punctuate that like a little gasping for breath or sobs. So much meaning in that counter subject. And then the bass gets the subject. And it now gets to go on with subject fragments in measure 16.5. Sounded just like an E flat major, didn't it? And it keeps going though. This is very, very beautiful, that writing. Above it now the soprano does one of my favorite parts, and this is its own separate motive. It's built a little bit on the idea of the syncopations of the counter subject, the rising 4th, 6th, and octave. That idea, more and more and more, and look what he does here. Up to E flat, up to G, and a excuse me, that second was F. So these scale degrees, those are the notes he's reaching for. Do, 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 E flat. Another little E, do, do, do. And falls. This is all sounding C minor, isn't it? Until it doesn't want to do this. You know what it does? That's a little heart stab there. It is going to D, but by way of a suspension with this. I'm going to back up now and do these bass fragments of. This is starting on beat 3, and I engraved it this way. I'd like to show you this color structural analysis. You will see on the right-hand column here, all of these numbers. Those are the number of measures in every system. This is a 4-measure system, a 2-measure, a 4-measure, a 2-measure. Now, why is this a 3.5 measure? And a 2, and a 3.5, and a 2, when they're all 4 measures. And the reason is, I took this beginning here, measure 13 in our C minor section, measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, and half of measure 4, and I left this as an open measure, no bar line here, because the new material begins here with the subject fragment entries and these leaping materials. This is a new start point, but it starts on the 3rd beat. So you have half a measure here, a full and a half. That makes a total of 2 measures. Another open measure, and this is the most exciting because it modulates seamlessly with that 4/3 suspension right here as a modulation back home to G minor, and the final subject entries here, beginning on the 3rd beat and not the 1st beat like we had at the beginning, but the material is the same. The beginning of the piece in the soprano starts 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. The last time starts on the 3rd beat. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It keeps going. And while we're still looking at this color map, you can see I'm getting pretty excited about this, because the heart and soul for me of this piece are these systems: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with these extended subject and counter subject materials, which I put in dashed lines, happens twice in the piece, here and here. Those are the leaps. Those are on the syncopations that we had at the conclusion of our opening counter subject material. That opening syncopation, Bach is building for the culminating material of the piece, here and here, with these fantastic leaps. It's just the most extraordinary writing. This is the last time. There's an urgency here, and all on the syncopation. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4. There's another E flat there. We began with the E flat, with the. This is the last time, and you can even see comparing. You could take your music like this and compare that this is exactly like this. Absolutely identical repetition for measures 1 and 2 that begin with the upbeats to measure 19 here. softens the end of the Goldberg first half. Sparse and thin, but oh, so beautiful. Now that was different. Those beats 3 and 4 there are not found anywhere else in the piece. How it starts. We have the material that we find in measure 1. We're coming to the end. There's the D again. Another one. And the final one. Way up to the A. Do you hear that pungent E flat that gives so much? How that's one of the notes of the G minor scale, the E flat, but how he uses it here. It's communicating such inner sadness and angst, and this is really about, I believe, the suffering. You know, Bach was a very compassionate person. He loved humanity. He loved his family, and he loved his church, and he was just an overflowing with generosity. And he understood the human condition. He understood all of our emotions, the gamut of our joys and the depths of our despairs. And this piece goes more into despair, more into the depths of that darker part of our searching and inquiry and lamenting. But you can play a piece like this. This is a doable piece for an intermediate level student, which is really wonderful. You know, to have something so rich like this and feeding your soul emotionally with a piece that you can play. You just have to start slowly. So let's do this final, the wrap up here of this is our last big section of the piece where we're back home on our tonic G minor. I'm going slowly on purpose. Here's our counter subject. You know these notes, you've already got this. But that's where it stops. Now, this is new material. Measure 20, beat 3 goes on. This is the extended subject, counter subject material. Here's the coda. Now one more very pungent C sharp. That's a raised 4th scale degree. Here's the 5 and the 1. Straight 5-1 cadence. The left hand alone there in the coda. One last syncopated ascending 4th. But this is the opening one. You can do a trill. And the soprano. This scale going up here. I wanted to say one more thing. I need to go through this soprano here, beginning with the 2 beat upbeats to measure 19. This is the last subject entrance for the soprano, for anyone. There are no more subject entries. Soprano gets to start the subject entry at the beginning of the piece, and it gets to finish the final subject entry. So we know this. We've really memorized this by now. Now here comes the new material here. These spirals. He could keep it going, could he? If we take the top notes of these spirals, this is measure 20, D, C, B flat, A, G. That is outlining the G minor triad scale degrees. That's 5-finger pattern. And that's where we started. Just remember those last 2 lines is pretty much just home key, G minor. And that's pretty predictable, not anything exciting, but you put that counter subject with it, with these agitated leaps. Now all of a sudden, it has a whole other meaning to it. And you put them together. Love that. That's a huge distance. I like this tempo. Here. We know it's going to go like that. I could really just linger here. I could spend an hour just with these last 6 measures. So when you do learn your piece, and if you choose to work from this chart package, take this away from the piano, take it into another room, go outside, sit under a tree and study this, and see if you can follow everything in your head. And then when you get back to the piano, just try one of these black boxes. You have 4 to pick from. And you do one of these big chunks every day, consistently, accurately, you'll have this piece learned before you know it, and you'll have it learned securely because you've got your automatic start points here. You know how the things end too. The ends of these are very important to understanding a piece. So you can practice just one system, like that last one. I can start right there. Tempo is now a serious consideration with the piece. I play this between 50 and 60 per quarter note, metronome marking. Between, it depends on how I feel. Sometimes I want it a little more flowing. But as long as it speaks. Tonic. So people just sing it like that. If you can sing it, you can shape it. Some versions, because you know there are historic recordings since this music has been around since 1721. Oh my goodness, that's 301 years. We're right now in 2022. This music is over 300 years old and it is timeless. Maybe more important for us now than ever. Anyway, some of the versions of these historic recordings that we fortunately have play this piece very, very fast. It's an option. I just don't hear the pathos that way. So for me personally, I like the slower tempo to really cue into the buried passus Druiusculus that's in here. So I have very much loved sharing this piece with you today. As it happens, this is the very last invention that I have worked on for the complete 15 two-part inventions. Now with this one, I have finished them all, and there are, it's been an extraordinary project for me, getting to know all of these and knowing the levels and the challenges of every one. This one does fit into some that you could do sooner rather than some of the more very difficult ones. So give it a try. You'd be surprised how much this can enrich your life, having a piece like this to work on. Something such beauty, such honesty and depth, and the wisdom of Bach's voice, his mind and his spirit. And the thing I'd like to close with is something that he actually said to his wife on his deathbed. He said, "Don't cry for me, for I go where music was born." I go where music is born. Oh, he had no fear of dying. He had an immense faith and belief and in eternal things, which this music is. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope you really take to heart learning this piece. And let me know how it's going for you. I love hearing from you. Thank you so much.